So it is no secret that I am a Sega fan. Like, I am a big fan of Sega. I grew up with the Genesis. I thought it was the best. I thought it was better than the Super Nintendo. In retrospect, you know, it kind of boiled down to what sort of games you preferred. Some of the Super Nintendo games might have held up a little bit better than Genesis and vice versa, but I am a Sega fan. But I'm not a blind Sega fan. I'm not one of these blind Sega fanboys who just loves everything Sega does, because I think they do a lot of stupid stuff. Now, obviously, I don't see their accounting books. I don't know what works for them and what doesn't work for them. But from an outsider's perspective, from someone who's been following Sega since he was a little kid, I feel like I know how to sort of maximize their IPs and potentially maximize their reach within the video game industry. Now, if you're a Sonic the Hedgehog fan, none of this really applies to you, because Sonic the Hedgehog is treated like the golden goose of Sega stuff. Whether you're talking about new games, compilations of old games, new TV shows, new movies in movie theaters, Sonic fans are always eating well. And yes, you could judge the quality of the games as varying, but I think the Sonic stuff that we've been getting lately has been pretty good. Sonic Superstars, also coming out this year. Sonic Origins Plus, we got Sonic Frontiers. All of these games were really well done, in my opinion, and very enjoyable. If you're a Sega Genesis diehard and you only look at Sega for the Genesis, once again, you're eating just fine. You're a glutton. Not only have you gotten multiple releases of Sega Genesis classics available on modern platforms since the Xbox 360 PS3 era, but you've gotten mini consoles as well. Sega's actually released two different Genesis mini consoles. There was the original one and then the Sega Genesis Mini 2. Both of these were very well received by both fans and consumers and critics. You know, that's more than both, because that's three, but whatever, dude. We're just gonna roll with it. And I think the library of games was very diverse and very dynamic to show off the highlights of the Sega Genesis. The Model 2 Sega Genesis Mini is actually right here at my desk. I play it from time to time when I'm like uploading a video or something, because I like having the Sega CD stuff on it. I think it's really cool. I like all the little intricate trinkets that they put into the menu system of these things. But if you like anything beyond Sonic the Hedgehog and you like anything beyond the Sega Genesis, you can pretty much go to hell. Like, that's just how I feel, Sega. That's how I feel like you treat me. Because you don't treat Virtua Fighter with the same respect. You don't treat Shining Force with the same respect. You don't treat Phantasy Star with the same respect. And I could go on and on and on. There are many IPs that Sega has that they just don't seem to care about. But there's also consoles that they don't seem to care about as well. And I, of course, am talking about the Sega Saturn and the Dreamcast. Because going back to the whole mini discussion we just had, mini systems used to be the shit. Everyone had to have one. You had the NES Mini, you had the Super Nintendo Mini, you had the TurboGrafx 16 Mini, you had the Commodore 64 Mini. And mini systems, I think, although they've sort of lost some of their luster, I think people still buy these things. I still think people are interested in these systems, especially when they're systems that potentially have nostalgia, or it's harder to come by the games from them. And that's what's bringing me to today's point. Probably one of my longest intros ever, but this is something where you have to till the soil. You got to get a hoe and till the soil to make it so that when you plant the seed, that it'll grow. Because if this seed doesn't grow, I'm going to be really annoyed. So Sega is now somewhat talking about new mini consoles for the Saturn and for the Dreamcast. Things that should have been done a long time, especially the Dreamcast, okay? We'll get into this in just a minute, but here's the article in question. Sega has released 2 mini Mega Drives so far. Saturn is difficult to turn into a mini console, says Sega boss. Well, no kidding. It's difficult. You have that weird architecture going on with it and all that sort of stuff. So reading on with it, there was a interview with the Sega president and COO Yukio Tsujino. I hope I'm saying that right. I feel like Tsujino, I feel like I'm pretty spot on with that, even though Tsujino sounds kind of Italian. I don't know, maybe he's half Japanese, half Italian. Who knows? I'm not here to judge him. So in an interview with Famitsu magazine that was translated by VGC, it says that Mr. Tsujino said that the Sega Saturn is surprisingly high performance, so the difficulty of miniaturization is also very high. I don't think it's a case of saying let's make another one because it sells well. It looks like it's going to be a little longer. So a lot of stuff to take away from that. Obviously, the Sega Saturn was a more difficult architecture than something like the PlayStation 1. I believe there was 2 GPUs in it. There was no dedicated 3D driver. Like, Sega Saturn was one of the harder systems to emulate for the longest time. But Sega Saturn emulation has gotten pretty damn good now. You have things like the potential Carbon engine. You have companies like M2. And I'm not trying to kiss MVG's ass. Screw MVG. But the Carbon engine is proving itself time and time again to be a very formidable foe with retro video games. Companies like M2, you know, they're port masters. So I feel like they could do this system potentially justice if it comes down to making a system. But it sounds kind of like there's hesitation with this, and I get that because of the standpoint that, hey, you know, this would be a large task to do. But let's keep reading on, and then I'll get into my deeper thoughts with this. I'd like to think about it when we're in a situation where we can openly develop it together with people who have always loved the Sega Saturn and Dreamcast. So now we're talking about, you want people like the Carbon engine. You want people like M2. You want people who have designed potentially emulators, who have designed back-end ways to play Sega Saturn and Dreamcast games. Because you also mentioned Dreamcast. Nobody here mentioned Dreamcast. We mentioned Sega Saturn. So now we're talking about a Sega Saturn Mini and a Dreamcast Mini. So to me, that shows that you want to do this. You want to do this. And obviously both systems are very unique systems, but let's be real about one thing. It's a hell of a lot easier to emulate Dreamcast stuff than it is Sega Saturn stuff. Point blank, period. Because Dreamcast emulation has been around, I don't know, it feels like since the dawn of time, and it runs on pretty much anything that you have that has somewhat modern specs on it. Cell phones, mini PCs. We've ran Dreamcast stuff upscaled on a bunch of mini PCs. Absolutely no problem. Now, a mini PC obviously costs more, but you also have to factor in that that mini PC has a version of Windows on it, so they had to license that, this, that, and the other. But strip all that away, and you have desire to do Dreamcast. You have desire to do Sega Saturn. Both libraries which are not well represented in the modern age of games. You did stuff like the Dreamcast collection on the Xbox 360, and then you forgot about it. Why can't I play Daytona USA? Why can't I play Virtua Fighter 3 TB? Why can't I play third-party games like D2 or, you know, first-party games like Zombies Revenge? I don't know why everyone hates Zombies Revenge. I think it's a pretty fun game. Why can't I play Sega Saturn games like Nights into Dreams or Virtua Fighter 2 or Fighting Vipers or anything? There's so much stuff here, Sega. You've tilled the land. You've made it so that the crops have been planted. And the skies are now looking, we're all looking towards the skies for this rain flood of Sega classics, this rain flood of Sega mini systems that doesn't involve the Sega Genesis, that doesn't involve the Game Gear, that actually takes a little bit of work. But the rewards, I feel, would far outweigh the risks of this. People want a Dreamcast Mini. People want a Sega Saturn Mini. I guarantee you this video is going to do very well because people want things like this. So how do we make it happen? I think we're at the point, especially with this interview, pending that this interview is something that we can latch onto. I feel like at this point we just need to be heard. People who want a Sega Saturn Mini, people who want a Sega Dreamcast Mini, we just need to be heard at this point. Send this video to Sega, tag them on Twitter in it. Like, you know, if we got to go grassroots with this, let's go grassroots with it. I got nothing but time, man. I sit around and talk about video games all day, take a nap, eat some food, rinse and repeat. That's my life. But if my life could turn into something good with Sega, because I know you're watching this video too, Sega. I know you're watching this because I know you watch me. Hi, Sega. I'm friends with people that work there. I know people that work there. Give us the goods, okay? Give us something a little bit more. Sonic can be your fallback option. If everything goes to hell, you still have Sonic. You still have Atlas. You still have Persona. Very popular franchises, cash cows right now for you. Take a little bit of a risk. Take a little bit of a plunge. Talk to MVG. He's not hard to get a hold of. Let's try to make something happen here. Let's do this. Get a Sega Saturn Mini in development. Get a Sega Dreamcast Mini in development. Or at the very least, a compilation of games for modern platforms. There's enough companies out there that would be interested in this. There's enough passionate retro gamers who don't have their head up their ass that would love to see something like this. and I'm one of them. So let's make this happen, man. I don't know. What are your ideas? How can we make this a foreseeable thing? Because obviously the desire is there. There's just not a plan to make it happen. But if we can convince them that other people have this same desire and other people want this plan to come to fruition, I feel like the sky's the limit. And maybe that's just me being naive, but I mean, hey, we don't know until we try. You know, if we try, we get some good buzz that, you know, yes, the public wants a Sega Saturn Mini. Yes, the public wants a Sega Dreamcast Mini. And then Sega just decides not to do it. At least we gave it an honest effort. We're doing this. We're doing this. Make it happen, Sega. I love you. I want to love you. And this will make me love you more. Share this video around. Share this information with your friends. Make a website article about it. Just copy pasting my video or translating it and putting it. I don't care. Okay. I don't care. I just want to make this a reality for people. I feel like we could do it together. And if not, hey, at least we tried. I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.